My name is Gonzalo. I'm a painter who draws, and I'm currently a resident at Oolite. I think that art is a way to understand the world and understand myself at the same time. And I think that art allows you the freedom to explore and see who you are. Initially, many people question what's in front of them. Is it a photograph? Is it a painting? Is it a drawing? And then in closer inspection, they realize there's a hand behind the imagery. For me, work is joy and it's playtime. And I try to embrace the playtime and exploration involved in every day coming to the studio and standing in front of a drawing. What makes me happy about the work is the process, the thrill of making something new, of exploring, of expanding the limits of the images that I can create. That makes me happy. And I think that art is such a powerful way of thinking of other ways of relating with our own reality and our own time. I think that when they find that the imagery somehow can be woven into their own personal histories, I think that that relationship with an object that is art and can relate to their lives, I think that could make them happy.
¿Cómo no puedo regresar a la escuela?
Ya hablamos de eso, Natalie. Es muy peligroso ahora.
Se le hizo llevar una Chano. ¡Piérdete! No sé a dónde.
Fran, ¿qué haces? ¿Dónde está tu hermano?
Creo que está en el baño.
¿Tanto tiempo?
¡Ale! ¡Mamá! ¡La troca! ¡Ale está en la troca! ¡Ale! ¡Hey, Ale!
¡Ale! ¿Qué te haces?
Since when do we lock the doors around here?
Since we let lazy spics into the country.
We were driving and this van was like driving right up like the back of our car and like shining the lights in and trying to push us off.
I think the perception is that it's still not accepted. It's still a heterosexual world that we live in.
How many people have took their own lives because they thought that God doesn't love them?
Within the next 2 weeks, I had a high-powered rifle shot through my home. Then we found a cardboard box taped to the bottom of my car.
Out of hating myself as much as society says I should, somehow I pulled myself out of that.
And 5 guys attacked a friend of mine. For someone to have that much animosity and hate, it was devastating.
If you haven't experienced something, it's hard to empathize with it.
When I was a little kid and terrified of coming out. And now I don't think twice about saying, yes, that's my husband.
I can open doors for my students that they tend to be more willing to walk through. And I can expose them to literature that will open their minds to all kinds of ways of being in the world.
I said I'd never write these words, for it reflects that you are far. All I want is you, and all I need is found only in your heart. All I want is you.
Yay.
Oh, hi, my name is Natalie Alfonso. I was born in Colombia, but moved to South Florida in 2006. Since then, I've been living in between Miami and Broward. My work is, I am an interdisciplinary artist. I use drawing, video, and installation, and I explore the notions of invisible labor and everything that happens before the production. This work is a iteration that I did where I drew this solid line with charcoal, and when people come in, they don't really know that the line was done by scrubbing the charcoal onto the wall. And eventually this becomes a performance where I try to erase the charcoal. This talking about what happens in housekeeping and all the moments that I had working as a housekeeper while I was doing my undergrad in Miami. So I feel like this work in particular touches upon that. This photograph is about, I did it on doing my master's degree in Dallas, Texas, and is this idea of making a drawn line in an open field. You cannot see the body, or you cannot see my body that had just made this line. I unrolled like 1,000 feet of fabric that I sewed together in the sewing machine. So it's this idea of removing the identity of the person or the artist who's making this drawing. I think a lot about line, and in this photograph, this is my latest installation and is the biggest drawing I have done up to date. It's a 22 feet long it's a 66 feet long wall by 22 tall. And in this work, it's called Anatomy, Study of a Wall. And basically what I try to do is create an X-ray of the interior structure of the wall. So kind of counting all the studs that are behind the plywood and the wood. And I made all this drawing by hand, by scrubbing charcoal and graphite directly on the wall as well, and creating a perspective where I try to fool the eye, because I feel like when we try to unveil what happens under the structures that sustain our lives, it's almost impossible to actually see what is under unless we break it open.
Hello, I'm Gday Shabaka, Onajide Shabaka. My art practice deals with photography, drawing, painting, sculpture. Mostly in the past few years, I've been researching the origin of and the path of rice. The first rice that was brought to this hemisphere was smuggled in the hair of enslaved women. And so, I'm looking at the botanicals and the various plants and insects that we find in nature. I went to Suriname a few years ago to find this heritage rice. And, I saw all these different insects that you don't see in the United States. And in the process of looking at them, I came up with this idea of the architecture that they create for the queen to be able to reproduce. And so that's where these kind of serpentine designs come from. This is actually a page from a book that I did just recently. A bookmaking residency last year. And this is actually on the Suriname River, returning back to the capital, Paramaribo. I had spent a couple of days there with a young man who was in a village. His family was living in a village, maroon population. And I, talked to through interpretation, of course, through one of the village elders who was actually harvesting the last of the rice at that particular time, and talking about a lot of other plants, because it just looks like a wild place full of just all kinds of weeds and stuff, but it's not that. There's all kinds of medicinal plants that are growing in there. And I had identified some, and And the village elder then, identified a whole bunch of other things, more than I could even remember, but it was a beautiful experience. And this is my book. This was done with screen printing, photographic reproduction, laser cut, and letter set with type letter set. And it's about 26 pages, and it includes the trip from Suriname, but also South, what do you call it? Georgia and the Low Country, Georgia and South Carolina, where rice was grown in the United States under slave conditions. During December, I was at a residency in the Everglades, and I've been looking at vultures for quite a few years, a couple of decades actually. And there were, every morning, as the sun warmed up the landscape, the vultures would come out of the trees and circle around until they found the winds that they could fly and just, fly around. They just, float everywhere. I mean, but they are also considered a sacred animal. And so that's kind of how I saw them, as being, sacred animals. And I'm still kind of working, I want to work on a little bit of that while I'm here. This was one of the underwater photographs that I collaged from my trip there in the Everglades. And from the surface, it doesn't look like anything, but under the water, under the surface of the water, it's a whole different world. You wouldn't even realize what you're looking at. It's totally different.
You're muted. There we go.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Amanda Keeley, and I'm a visual artist, but I use a lot of different mediums. I work a lot with books and with text and with language and semiotics, communication. This is a piece that I just finished. This is while we're installing Las Palabras Mi Bañan Como El Mar. It's in the Hialeah Gardens Library, and it's mounted to the ceiling, and essentially it translates as "let the words wash over me like the ocean." And the community of Hialeah is primarily Spanish, and so I wanted it to be a piece when they walk into the library that they look up and see these gorgeous letters. And then also the floor is a recycled beach glass terrazzo, which I'll get into next. This is a show that I did at the Wolfsonian Museum, and I took over the Bridge Tender House. Can you scroll down? There's a second page to this. Oh, no. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I did an artist book dedicated to the color orange. I went through the archive of the Wolfsonian and picked out pieces that aren't normally displayed in public. And they all had some kind of connection to orange or to the citrus industry. And the Bridge Tender House actually was a bridge located in downtown Miami. And when it opened, all the women came from the community and served orange juice. And it was an old Miami Herald article that I found. So my work is always deeply rooted in history. You can just go to the next one. This is a piece that I did for Vizcaya Museum, Jadit, and I had been researching Vizcaya and the building of Vizcaya, and on the facade that faces the ocean, I found this tiny little sundial, and it's a Horace quote, and translated, it means take the gifts of this hour, put serious things aside. And so that was installed for like 2 years in the East Loggia, which is facing the garden. But I felt that it really encapsulated kind of the fantasy world of Vizcaya. This is some recent work that I'm kind of be jumping off of while I'm here. And this was from a series that I produced while I was in a residency in Belgium. And essentially they're all, I designed a font, and it is, I laser cut wood blocks, I was screen printing, I was digitally printing, and this is a whole series. The top one is in Latin, and it translates to "she flies on her own wings." The second one means she makes her meaning known. And it's all about statements of women empowerment. And also I wanted them to be slightly abstract. And my idea is to embed them in architecture. And so that's what I'm here working on, is to start this series of basically terrazzo with embedded statements of empowerment.
Hello, I am Edison Peñafiel. I am a visual artist. I am originally from Ecuador and moved to the States in 2002. My work consists of projects created through the camera, evolving from photography to stop motion animation, video, immersive multimedia installations, and painting, and dealing with concepts of history, labor, power, displacement. The projections contain multiple characters walking towards an animated horizon in a never-ending journey. They pull a physical rope, and that extends into the space, as you can see, and into these bundles of belonging containing furniture, luggage, and crate. This piece is called Ni aquí ni allá, neither here nor there. These projects I'm presenting today were produced during the last 3 years, and they involve interweaving projections with physical space and objects to create a surreal environment where the viewer can immerse in and learn from an audiovisual experience. The next project is titled Landscape. It's one of my latest series that has been expanded in multiple formats. This one contains projections on chiffon fabric, displaying multiple characters trudging through an evolving landscape of grass, cotton field, and water, and a desert also. The work taps into the absurd and the perpetual qualities of these global issues with a tint of aesthetic of German expressionism films and old French cinema. This type of aesthetic emphasizes how I feel regarding these issues and ideas over replicating the reality of these situations. Few of the main characteristics are simplified shapes, bright colors or high contrast, and gestural marks as well as chiaroscuro. The next work is a continuation of the previous work. It's titled Landscape Paintings. It is a collection of 10 large-scale compositions. Each one is 9 by 7 feet, and it's a continuation of the previous project that taps into art history. In this case, Landscape emphasizes a portrait format in which the subject is presented in the act of scaping. There is a physical barbed wire fence in front of the paintings, creating a separation between the huge achromatic characters and the viewer. So eliminating the specifics, the work can be put into many contexts of displacement and migration, such as the Middle East refugees and South American, Central American, as well as African migrants. So my characters do not reveal their identity, as they could represent anyone, and they are trapped forever in a repeating the same action perpetually, like in a Sisyphean cycle. And I want the work to be global, as these situations repeat throughout the world and throughout history as well. Thank you. Yeah, that's another view of the exhibition, which happened last November. It was a solo show, and this project was funded by the Knight Foundation for the production of this exhibition. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Veazey, and my work, I do a lot of different things. I work in photography, sculpture, painting. This image is a group exhibition at Oolite Arts. My piece is actually the sculpture in the center of the room that sort of mimics a fence line of a work site. I guess I've always really been interested, I'd recently been interested in this sort of like transitional landscape that Miami has. It's both like lush and tropical while also having like urbanized developmental zones. So in this particular piece, there's a lot of different textiles that are being used, painted elements, steel, wood, photo prints. So it's a very much like mixed media assemblage. This is sort of like a segue into kind of taking on a more two-dimensional form. Even though this is particularly viewed in the round, it still has like a somewhat of like a flatness to it, and it has sort of transitioned what I've been working on recently, which have primarily been works that come off of the wall two-dimensionally, but have three-dimensional elements within them. So these sort of have different street photography elements embedded in them, using different image transfer techniques. It's also sort of like my first foray into this idea of like painting. So these are sort of like assembled different found objects, different vinyls, text, embellishments. This one has like domestic linens. So it sort of like relates to different facets of like the urban environment. Like this one has sort of like a found rug that was painted. It has different transferred imageries. This one kind of has also, it was really into this idea of like the anthropomorphization of objects. So like when objects wear things or like have sort of like actions that are kind of displaced just because of the environment that they're in. These sort of like ever-changing landscape scenarios or like unintentional landmarks, kind of like ready-mades. So this sort of like form of like wearing, which I guess also relates to the domestic objects that I use, like this shirt that's been sort of deconstructed and then reappliqued to sort of like suggest the body, but then also has elements of this like sort of like tropical landscape imagery within it. So like the relation of the body with the relation of my environment. And this is sort of more of like a formalized study with various materials, like a deconstructed sequin tank top, some found textiles, and then different elements like hardware elements found within the street. So kind of like bringing in the environment like directly into the image plane.
Hi everyone, I'm Sue Montoya. I'm a photo-based artist. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. I was born in LA, but I grew up between Honduras, Tegucigalpa, and Miami. And my work has a lot to do with those places. This is part of a recent series that I started in the dark room, which was called Collisions. And it's through this process called chemigrams. So a little background on myself. I started, my interest started in high school in the dark room. 15 years ago, I was just a kid experimenting, and it had been a while since I was in a darkroom space. And this came about during that time, which was great because I had a lot of emotions that I had to sort of deal through or work through, right? And the chemigram is this quite literal reflection of whatever you do on the photographic sensitive paper. These are made using watercolor and lime juice. So anything that has like any sort of acidity or tint you can use. I hope to continue to work on these here. and this is part of my thesis work, which is called Functional Construction Sites. It's a portmanteau of a functional site, which is an art historical idea of investigating site-specific works. We can think about Asher, and also of a functional construction site being a home or a space that is a home to someone that is in a constant state of construction. My father is a construction worker, and our home, as far as I can remember, has been a space that has been constantly being worked on. And this is also a tradition that's very common in Mexico and throughout Latin America, in building a home that is in a constant state of building. And this is from another series of work called Ruins in Reverse. These are transfers onto wood. And I've always had this image of a mountain in my head ever since I was a kid, because I spent so much time in Honduras and then, had the drastic change of moving to Miami, which is a very flat landscape in comparison. So for a couple of years, I just spent a lot of time looking for these mounds, these ephemeral mounds that were very similar to the memories I had, which often cases were not there after, a couple of days. And this was photographed in Gainesville, where I did my master's. So it's this conversation about the destruction that has to occur in order to construct new urban environments. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Shire Vanta Black Riggins. I am an artist, an activist, and educator, originally from St. Louis, and I've lived in Miami since the late 80s. This is a drawing. This is the first drawing in a series of memorial portraits. This is of a 6-year-old named King Carter, who was shot and killed in the city of Miami in 2016. And I began my series of memorial portraits with this child's portrait, because every time I saw this child, he reminded me of my 6-year-old. This is another 6-year-old. This is the most recent drawing in that series of memorial portraits. And this baby's name is Chastity Saunders. She lost her life 2 weeks ago in the city of Miami. And with this portrait, there are about 300 portraits that I've done since 2016. And I tell the stories of victims of gun violence, police violence, and domestic violence. That video was a full pan of a memorial mural that I started in July of 2020. And it is on the posterior wall of an art complex in Wynwood in Miami. And it includes 547 names of victims of gun violence, police violence, and domestic violence. That mural is titled Say Their Names. And I included the English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole translation of that phrase, because I wanted to speak directly to that community in Miami. And I wanted it to be a message that this type of crime doesn't only affect one pocket of the community. And I hand stenciled all 547 names on the wall. It took me 6 months. I had a team of volunteers of about 40 who came to help me fill in the names. And as a result of that project, I was awarded the inaugural Social Justice Award by Oolite. I'm very thankful for that award. That mural was completely community funded during a pandemic, and I'm really, really thankful for that. It stretches from one city street to the next city street. It's about 200 feet long and about 25 feet high at its highest point. This last image is an image of an entire family. This is the Ahmad family. There were 8 members of this family that volunteered to help me work on this mural because there are 4 members of the Ahmad family who are memorialized on this wall. I met this family throughout the process of working on this mural. And this image includes about 4 generations from this family. And this picture was taken at the unveiling of this mural, which I did during Art Week in Miami. And myself and a survivor of gun violence, we spoke aloud all 547 names as a performer, activated the space and cleansed the space. So the performance was about an hour long. And I was very thankful that various members of different families were able to participate in the reading of these names.
Hi, I'm Jamie Gershon. I'm from Massachusetts, based in Miami for about 15 years almost, and I had previously lived here in Colorado, so this is like a homecoming in a way. This work stemmed off of the pandemic and just my personal anxiety, particularly at the beginning when none of us really knew what was going on and what we should do, how cautious we needed to be. So I started to create these quarantine characters as a series of self-portraits to just quell my anxiety. So that was Anxious Annie and the Quarantine Blues. This video is the teaser for my upcoming first feature documentary titled Birthright, which will be the closing film at the Miami Film Festival next month.
I want you to see the sand. I want you to see that ocean. I want you to feel the cry of the human people for freedom.
We say we're Cuban. Our parents are from there, not us. Why would anybody want to watch this? We're not Jay-Z or Beyonce.
Estos chicos son unos locos.
El cubano de esta era no tiene nada que ver con el cubano de hace 30 años.
Nunca tuve necesidad migratoria. Irme de Cuba no me es atractivo.
I feel robbed that I should have
been able to study music in Cuba.
You
I knew you were going to say that. Yes. Okay. Let's do this.
This is a non-fictional situation.
So I guess I didn't say that I'm a photo and film-based artist. I work in documentary practice, and a lot of my documentary work informs my art practice. So this is another self-portrait titled The Quarantine Queen. And I do a lot of self-portraiture as commentary on sort of the things that I see in the world as a documentarian. And let's see what's next. And this is a teaser for my Emmy Award-winning short, 6 Degrees of Immigration, about my marriage divided by immigration policy. And this is the toilet paper thief, also part of the quarantine characters. So while I'm here, I'm hoping to make some additional quarantine characters, and I'm working on going through my archive of documentary footage to expand on my short 6 Degrees of Immigration, and work on a teaser to build a feature out of that work. And the film will talk about, well, they're immigration stories that challenge perception of what immigration looks like by telling human stories that anyone could relate to about love, loss, health, hope, ambition, and self-expression. And all of these short films will interweave to create one feature film. So I'm very excited to be here. And hopefully we'll get to make some more of these characters. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Terrell Bouliers. I'm originally from Lakeland, Florida. I've been based in Miami for about 1.5 years now. I'm a cartoon illustrator, a community organizer based here in Miami, as well as an occasional photographer. And yeah, so my work is rooted in the exploration of Black queer livelihood, specifically removing the mask that patriarchy and Western colonization has forced queer people to wear throughout history, discovering displaced cultural heritage, language, as well as innate strengths that are found within Black queer lineage. I use my illustrations as almost like a visual manifesto of the world that I like to see for Black queer people, Black trans people. So I've spent a lot of the past 1.5 years kind of addressing some of my own personal unaddressed traumas from growing up visibly queer in a strict Caribbean household, and how that has kind of pushed me to kind of hide parts of myself. And now I'm allowing my work to kind of explore the identity of who I like to, who I want to see for myself as well as for my community. So this specific piece, well, the last piece, this specific piece, oh, here we go, is actually 3 Black trans femme icons, Fat Femme, Tranny-licious, and Love Gia. And they are kind of acting as trans assailants against kind of male patriarchal figures that are known to cause harm to trans femme icons. So they sit at a table with a bunch of different trans women throughout history and present day as they kind of toast to a supper of being able to achieve the safety and kind of like taking down their silence. Their heads are in the table. This is a cover of my first comic book that I had the pleasure of creating over quarantine in collaboration with Kaleidoscope Magazine, a publication based out of Milan, Italy, also in partnership with Gucci. It is a narrative based around Kelsey Liu, who is an experimental cellist, performance artist, and musician. And the story basically goes through kind of Liu's exploration to their queerness, as well as, you know, tapping into spirituality, addressing childhood traumas, and doing that all through the art of herbalism. This is actually a scene from that illustration, which is kind of the liberation scene where Liu finds kind of their community of people dancing in the woods and just celebrating their queer liveliness. They found their tribe. So as you can see, they're seeing just an eclectic group of beautiful queer bodies. And yeah, it's just supposed to signify just the joy that comes out of finding that part of yourself. A lot of my work kind of speaks for itself. I allow for my work to speak for itself. I feel like as a Black artists, a lot of times we have to explain the traumas that are based behind our pieces. And I kind of want my cartoons to represent more of the joy as opposed to the traumas that is from the experience of a queer Black person. So a lot of it is, like I said, a visual manifesto of what I look to see for our feature. Like this is an illustration called Club Oasis that I did, which was something that I created right before I moved to Miami. Which was essentially an underground Black queer club space for just people to be able to come, shed their skin, shed these masks that, you know, we have to wear in order to live within, you know, a space like Miami where social currency is so prevalent, and be able to just unapologetically be ourselves. This illustration actually became the foundation of my work with MAS-TC, which is a queer Black party and collective that me and a group of people run different programming and parties, as well as educational content based in Miami. So. This was kind of a autobiographical comic that I started working on a few years back, where I was exploring my own personal challenges with mental illness, depression, and anxiety, and how social media and the masks that we are forced to wear when performing as, you know, influencers, as people like to call them, how gravely that can impact people with mental illnesses. And yeah. This was another illustration from what was gonna be like a global pride campaign, where essentially this is like the interrogation scene where the 3 Black femme assailants have found these male villains and are essentially, I mean, the work kind of speaks for itself, doing the duty. And yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Khan Nguyen Vu, or everyone just calls me Vu, my last name. I use they, them pronouns, and what's about to come on is a short video I made that kind of just brushes over my process and give you a glimpse into how I work.
My name is Khan Nguyen Hoang Vu, or just Vu. I was born in Bien Hoa, Vietnam in '97, but I grew up here in the United States. The work I've been making over the past few years is very much informed by my interest in spirituality, migration, and the non-binary body navigating and observing space. For as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in drawing parallels between nature and man, things that derive from nature and things that are man-made. The method I've been using to hone awareness during my process is writing. So I wrote and I wrote. I've write everything down, every fleeting thought bound between these pages, organized and immortalized in a way. Another tool that I picked up to explore this idea of permanence is the art of tattooing.
And it's shown here that I'm using a machine, but I'm now mostly hand poking when I tattoo.
I find myself resonating most with those souls that are not afraid to delve into the unknown and the unseen. I'm inspired by all the synchronistic events that occur in this human life, every coincidence. Nowadays, I find myself really cherishing those moments where I come back to the present moment to be still and receptive to those little signs that the universe oftentimes throw at us. In moments like that, I feel like there's a divine will working in my favor. I know that this material world can be very fragile and that change is the only constant, and the only constant is change.
All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Almaz Wilson, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I was born in Columbia, Maryland, and grew up in rural Maryland between Baltimore and DC. I got my bachelor's in biological anthropology from the University of Maryland and my master's in painting and drawing from the University of Florida. So there's a video that's gonna play, and the title is Soft Ground Pocket Realm. So this work is a part of a series of gestural time performances related to the body, memory, and experience of body and space. So I'm just gonna talk about my practice a little bit while it plays. My work is rooted in material investigation and process as a language. We carry history within our bodies at the cellular level. And I wonder just how such history can translate through the vehicle of memory, time, and place. My research draws on somatic empathy and healing as a radical act through the acknowledgement of collective consciousness and among the concrete and ethereal worlds. I'm committed to exploring intimacy, loss and resilience, and identity in flux through the possibilities of endlessness in placemaking and shape making. So my work is rooted in drawing, gathering, and collecting. And I complete work through a lot of ritualistic type practices like mining, tracing, excavating, and making marks and repetition. Shapes within shapes are layered throughout my drawings, sculptures, collaborative and performative work as a means to reflect on the generative process of translation as a tool to investigate somatic, emotional, and psychic. I'm interested in how the body translates visceral information within a space and how a space can become a shared expression, an expression of a shared relationship. When I think about space, I'm considering what's there, but also what's missing, and particularly how much space is uninhabited. I'm always asking myself how space can be created, or how can something feel more or less spacious. I think this kind of thinking has informed the way I create my work compositionally within drawing, sculpture, and performance. And also sound is a big factor that informs my work as it also relates to space and how we feel close or distant within a space, within a specific location due to the presence of sound. I'm interested in how the body accumulates emotional information and how intergenerational relationships can link us with timelessness. And I'm also very much interested in how there's an exchange constantly between our internal and external selves and how this expression can become shaped and shared in our collective experience. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Philip Karp. I'm an artist and photographer. I was born in New York City and I currently live and work in Miami, Florida. My practice involves photography and the process of image making. I collect, make, and archive photographs. The larger image in the background here is a vinyl 24 by 36. The framed photograph is 11 by 14. I normally start with a question like, does this work? Or can I take a picture of this? Not just literally, but on a moral level. What I appreciate about art is it does something that's beyond words. Being able to relate or empathize with specific experiences in a way that moves beyond the core. Photography is related to looking, it's a perspective. We have a language for speaking, so we often look for this sort of narrative when we look at pictures. But if you ask a question like what makes this picture interesting, or, it kind of like takes the essence of the work that isn't actually described by what it represents, literally. I think maybe in other arts it's more obvious, but in this case, the eye immediately finds a connection to reality. And like, it kind of assumes the message somehow is consumed by that reality in the picture. A lot of my images come from day-to-day life. I work over the span of time archiving images. This is a vinyl as well, about 4 feet by 7 feet, installed on this curve of a wall that is opposite of the curve of the architecture of the structure that's in the image. The mystery of pictures sort of begins with the idea that the camera's lens describes everything in front of it in just clear detail, but it's completely unreliable in its gauge of reality. So then there's this dialogue between memory and our ideas of actual physical representation. I'm interested in the specific nature of a photograph and its abstract reception as an image. The opposing forces or parallels come about like sadness and humor, abstraction and reality, aesthetics and morals, motion and logic. There's days you can feel the world and other days you can analyze, but at the same time, it's rare that you could do both. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for each artist for your generosity and for welcoming us into your practice. It was really wonderful to see your work today, and it was wonderful to have a glimpse into what you all do as we welcomed you to the ranch. So thank you for being here as well. We're lucky to have you here for 5 weeks. And I want to thank everybody else who has joined us today to meet the residents. On March 4th at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, you'll get another chance to hear from them. They'll be presenting work they've made while in residence here at Anderson Ranch. So mark your calendars for that. And also don't miss a lecture with visiting critic Larry Osai-Mensah on February 18th at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So those are my announcements. And until then, be well and good night, everyone.